Facebook sues India? What does that even mean?
Yeah, a bit weird. On Wednesday, Facebook-owned WhatsApp sued the Indian government, challenging new regulations that it said could allow authorities to make people's private messages traceable and conduct mass surveillance. That is only for Facebook to do, not the Indian government.
Yeah, and the
Uh,
Indian government, they got to be sitting here going like, "Oh no, oh so no, we're being sued by Facebook." That is definitely the largest of our problems right now.
yeah, we don't have any other issues currently plaguing our country.
COVID-19
Um,
Oh, that's okay.
among, among the
You're just
among the
farming for puns now.
They're also having a lot of issues with their farmers, just in case you didn't get that joke. Among the new rules are requirements that big social firms
Well,
appoint Indian
just to
citizens.
clarify, hold on. Actually, I want to clarify for a second.
All right. Yep.
India is not having issues with their farmers. Their farmers are
Hmm.
taking issue with what the Indian government is doing.
That's a
So
much better way of saying
that's
that.
that's an important distinction. And farmers, in case you guys didn't know, are very important
Oh yeah.
because without farmers,
Eating things is pretty key to survival.
yeah, you need food. And last time I checked, you are a soft, worthless millennial or Gen Z, incapable of dirtying your hands to farm your own food in your backyard. Also, a separate problem is that there's two entire generations of people that cannot afford a backyard, but that's a whole separate conversation to get
And
into.
therefore no ability to gain that experience or learn how,
Yeah. So
despite lots
anyway,
actually really wanting to, and certain apartment complexes being pushed into adding green plots so people can have small gardens so they can learn those skills. Sorry, continue.
yeah, the point is, farms are good, and the food that
Yes.
comes off of them is good. Carry on, Luke.
All right. Among the new rules are requirements that big social media firms appoint Indian citizens to key compliance roles, remove content within 36 hours of a legal order, and set up a mechanism to respond to complaints. They must also use automated processes to take down avoiding word for demonetization reasons. If I wasn't wearing these things and was on video doing stuff with other people,
I actually have no idea what you're
that
talking
type of
about.
content. Well, I don't want to say this
What?
because this is a demonetization word.
What, pornography?
That's a demonetization word. You just did it.
Oh, well, I guess we're stuck with it now.
Rip.
Carry
Okay,
on.
moving on. The case asked the Delhi High Court to declare that one of the new IT rules is a violation of privacy rights in India's constitution, since it requires social media companies to identify the first originator of information when authorities demand it. And people familiar with the lawsuit told this to Reuters. Reuters.
Yeah.
Right. Reuters is that other thing. Yeah, this is long and stuff, but I guess Facebook, in an odd move, is trying to protect data.
Yeah. So they're basically saying that because their messages are encrypted end to end, it would have to break encryption for receivers of messages, as well as the originators, in order to comply with the new law. Oh man, see, that's really challenging, because I also can understand that aside from conducting mass surveillance, I can also understand why, with some of the problems that they've had with misinformation spreading on WhatsApp in India, that the Indian government might care about knowing where exactly these messages are
Yes. Yeah.
originating. People have literally died because of misinformation spreading on WhatsApp in India.
Globally, probably, if we're being honest.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funky because there's also the other problem where, like, okay, if they can't do their encryption stuff that they're currently doing, even if they're just adding a key for the Indian government, anytime this is something that I think governments globally have a really hard time understanding.
Yeah.
Anytime you add a key, you aren't necessarily giving that key to everyone, but that key is somehow available now.
Yeah.
And
it exists, which is worse than a key that does not exist.
Exactly. So you're not necessarily just handing it out to everyone, but there is now potential that somehow it could be taken. And whenever that is a reality, it is often found that eventually that key is taken. there's lots of governments that have a big issue understanding this, because they're like, no, I want access to the stuff. You don't have to give it to other people, but you have to give it to me. And it's like, okay, well, that ends up giving it to everyone, because you see the amount of like breaches. I mean, didn't Canada Post just have like a 900,000 person data breach or something?
I'm not sure. I didn't see that one.
At this point, like, everyone's just numb to it. This stuff happens all the time. So
this gets really challenging too, because if I'm Facebook or I'm Twitter, on the one hand, I can understand a legitimate use for this kind of oversight. But on the other hand, it's not like India's ruling party has a great track record for, as far as disinformation is concerned themselves. So do I really want to hand the keys to the castle on the premise that they're trying to, make sure that, pornography and disinformation can be dealt with? Do I really want to hand the keys to the castle over to a party that is probably going to abuse it? And once I do that, does it open up the floodgates for other jurisdictions to ask for the same thing? Because the thing is, like, if I'm Facebook or I'm India and I want to operate according to the law, that means I need to operate according to the law in every country that I operate in. So another great example of a company seemingly absolutely kowtowing to a local government in order to have the right to operate there is Apple. Did you see the news, Luke, about, I think it just finished being built, but Apple now has a massive data center in China that like literally has like living complexes around it for all the people that need to staff this thing. And basically, in order for them to keep operating in China, the Chinese government said, all your Chinese user data must be stored in China. And as soon as it's in China, and the data center was built in collaboration with a CCP linked entity, as soon as it's in China and staff from this, or I forget what the name of the organization is, but staff from there have physical access to the servers, effectively Apple, who spends a lot of their time talking about the importance of user privacy and user data security, has handed over the data of all of their Chinese customers to the Chinese government effectively. Now, we don't know that the CCP has actually exercised their ability to get access to this data. But what we do know is that once you have physical access to a data center, it's just a matter of like when you feel like taking it. It's not a matter of whether that data is protected at all. It's not at that point. So
unless it's also inaccessible to the people that own the data center, but that's the only,
So there's lots of concern, right? So back to my point about how if you want to operate in a given territory, you are going to have to comply with the laws of that territory. And so what will happen is if Facebook ultimately gives in to the Indian government and does this, then other governments are going to see that and go, oh, wow, it's that easy. We just have to like change our law to make it so that, what is the wording? Any significant social media intermediary, so they're defining it as a firm with over 5 million registered users, has to abide by these rules. We've actually been going through a similar conversation with YouTube over the last little while regarding the Canadian Bill C-10, which is targeting, really media platforms like Netflix, for example, making sure that they are adhering to the same Canadian culture preservation laws that traditional broadcasters have had to for decades. You have to show X amount of Canadian content alongside international content. You have to have Y amount of French content, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're now taking those same rules and they're targeting online streaming platforms. And they recently revised the scope to include user-generated content platforms like YouTube. So Google's having a little freak out. And part of it is that they haven't said this, but I'm sure part of it is that in order to show, a quota of Canadian content, they would have to change their algorithm and also expose their algorithm to scrutiny from outsiders to make sure that it's actually doing what they say it's doing. It would be a lot of development work. They hate sharing the internal workings of how suggested, like recommended videos work on YouTube. And then the bigger concern, I suspect, from Google's point of view, is that as soon as the Canadian government gets this through, other countries, much the same as we're talking about here, are going to look at that and go, "Oh, yeah,
we want that too.
Yeah, why don't
well.
why don't we have control over, what Google is serving to our citizens?" And there's a lot of regimes in the world that I would be a lot more concerned than the Canadian government, though they've hardly had a perfect track record of late. But there's a lot of regimes in the world that I would be even more concerned about having control over what can and can't be transmitted over social media. I mean, it really feels like we're coming to a point where the free and open internet is being assaulted from all sides. And, even the ones that, like Apple, sort of talk a lot about user privacy and user security first, ultimately have demonstrated that when push comes to shove, making sure that they can put iPhones in the hands of Chinese consumers is more important than actually safeguarding their data. And I'm only singling out Apple because they're in the news about this like massive data center that they basically collaborated with the Chinese government on. That's the only reason I'm picking on them. Don't imagine that I imagine that Google or Facebook or Microsoft or Amazon is ultimately going to behave any differently until I see proof otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, a precedent for a lot of those companies has been set already that they wouldn't. So.
Oh, interesting. Yuxhuang in the Floatplane chat says, 3 years ago, I got a message saying that my iCloud account was subject to move to China. I was staying in China at that time. I'm Canadian. I sent a very threatening email to Apple's support and CEO's office, and they apologized in an email very carefully. Yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing that you would want to be extremely careful about how you apologize. Because if you apologize to this Canadian customer too profusely because it was unthinkable for us to move your data to China, well,
that's offensive to,
Chinese customers. Yeah. Pretty much. Okay. Jamal Taylor says, yeah, walking away from a billion or multi-billion person market isn't something you can just say, screw it and do. I mean, it is something you can do because even though India and China have 2.5 billion between them, almost 3 billion, I think, between the two of them at this point, there's still billions and billions of customers outside of those places that you could still work with. That is an option. Whether it's, a great option for your shareholders who you are beholden to is a completely separate conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, okay. So in summary, in fairness, Facebook's opposition to the Indian government seems to be, on the surface anyway, mostly about the good of the people and the privacy of the people. So, hey, maybe there's some hope. Maybe Mark has enough now, and his Hawaiian island is enough, and he doesn't need more money.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that either.
I don't know about that.
Can I just think positive, please?
Sorry?
Can I just think positive, please?
No.
Why?
That's illegal. It's straight to jail. I do wonder what the Zuck's land ownings are going to look like by the time he's done.
I know,
it's
right?
Interesting.
I know.
It seems like Bezos is in the super mega yacht ultra villain route of like $500 million yachts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So he wants the floating land.
Yeah.
His yacht has a mini yacht, and that mini yacht has a helicopter platform because it's so freaking big.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a kick out of that. That's for his girlfriend, so because she's into helicopters.
Yeah. So might as well include that. And then the Zuck is going traditional. Just straight up land.
Straight up evil villain lair on an island.
The country that you currently reside in won't let you just run it and do whatever you want. Well, that's not fair. Just buy your own. Easy.